welcome. We're going to open up for the Architectural Board of Review meeting. It's a special meeting on March 4th, 2024. We will start with roll call.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I'll proceed with roll call. Chair Anderson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen?
Here.
Board Member Black?
Here.
Board Member Six?
Here.
Board Member Sofrin?
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Great, and we're going to do some general business before we get into our first item. So first up is public comment. If any member of the public would like to speak on something other than what's on the agenda today, you may let us know.
All right. Thank you, Chair Anderson. We're not seeing any movement, so I'll go ahead and move to virtual public comment. If you wish to speak on Zoom at this time, you can raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands raised, and we also did not receive any general written correspondence, so I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Anderson.
Thank you. We will close general public comment and go to the approval of the minutes for the ABR meeting on February 20th, 2024.
So moved and discussion.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I will now pull up the minutes of the February 20th full board ABR meeting.
All right, and second, and what's your discussion?
Item 1, motion number 4. It just should read, response to our pre-application comments, comma, strike regarding, and a comma after parking. So all three of those were separate items.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, let's take roll call.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I'll take roll call vote. Chair Anderson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen?
Yes.
Board Member Black?
Yes.
Board Member Six?
Yes.
Board Member Sofrin?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Then we will move to the approval of the consent calendar for February 26th, 2024.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Item A on the February 26th ABR consent agenda, 119 Harbor Way, proposal to combine and remodel 2 existing lease spaces to create 1 new lease space to be utilized as restaurant space. Project includes exterior alterations to existing doors and windows, new door at west elevation, and new outdoor counter bar space. The project requires Planning Commission approval of a coastal development permit, and the project was continued indefinitely to the Planning Commission with the comment that the board finds that the plans are ready for approval as proposed following Planning Commission approval of the coastal development permit. Item B, 102 South Voluntario Street. Proposal for a detached 2-unit ADU. Each unit will be 620 net square feet. And the project received final approval with the comment that the project substantially conforms to the plans that received project design approval on May 30th, 2023. Those were the only 2 items on the February 26th consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve those consent minutes. Second.
Any discussion? Okay, let's go to roll call.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I'll take roll call vote. Chair Anderson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Whalen?
Yes.
Board Member Black?
Yes.
Board Member Six?
Yes.
Board Member Sofrin?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now let's move to announcements, requests by applicants for continuances and withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals. Do we have any?
There are no staff announcements. However, we will be receiving a presentation from the project's case planner, Megan Arciniega, for item 1. Thank you.
Thank you. And any subcommittee reports? No? Okay. All right. Let's move in to our one and only item today, 3805 State Street, also called the Macy's site. This is a proposal to demolish an existing 3-story commercial building and associated asphalt parking lots and landscaping. The project includes a lot split to create a 8.79 acre parcel. 3 mixed-use buildings are proposed, providing 642 apartments and 27,748 square feet of commercial space. The project utilizes the AUD incentive program and California State Density Bonus Program, proposing 5% very low income units and 5% moderate income units and a 20% density bonus, allowing the proposed base density of 62 units per acre. The proposed buildings vary in height from 2 to 6 stories, with a maximum height of 76.5 feet. Proposed parking for the project includes 2 levels of subterranean parking serving residential uses, 2 ground-level parking garages for commercial uses, and 13 surface loading spaces. Right-of-way improvements include new sidewalks and parkways on State Street and Hope Avenue, meeting the pedestrian master plan requirements, and a new right-hand turn lane from State to Hope. On-site improvements include a vehicular connection from Hope Avenue to the western edge of the property, connecting to the off-site drive to Lacumba Drive, a new Class 1 bike lane connecting State Street to Hope Avenue, new permeable paving, landscaping, and plazas, and paseos that will be available to the public. This review is for comments only. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. The project will require submittal of a formal planning application subject to compliance with the project compatibility findings, urban design guidelines, Upper State Street area design guidelines, and outdoor lighting design guidelines. Okay, and we have the planner from the city who will be giving us a quick presentation. Take it away.
Thank you, Chair Anderson and board members. My name is Megan Arciniega. I'm a senior planner in the Planning Division, and I'm here to present alongside with Patsy Price, who will be our project planner taking this project forward, of the project before you at 3805 State Street, also known as the Macy's site. Because this is a substantial project before you, we wanted to give this item its fair time on an agenda to really kind of give an overview of both to your board and the public as an introduction to this project itself and the process that lies ahead, and to kind of give some clarity around the process steps that we're going to be going through. So my presentation is going to focus on what is this project in terms of process, what can we expect from your board's review and future reviews, and then the applicant will focus on the project details and site layout, et cetera. So as we know, we're at the Lacumba Plaza Shopping Center. It's in the whole, the shopping center is 31 acres and is comprised of 8 parcels, and it's in the Upper State Street area. Now, in the early 2000s, the city undertook study of this area because we knew that it was an opportunity site for housing. So generally, when we look at surface level parking lots or single-story commercial spaces, those offer opportunities for densification and allow more housing units. As you know, that's one of our city's current priorities, and the state's priority is to provide more housing. So this area was looked at that time as an opportunity site for housing, and the city underwent a study of the Upper State Street area. We also did a traffic study to study the Upper State Street area in conjunction with identifying those new uses. And the city came up with the result of those were design guidelines that your board has today, and those are basically the implementing elements of those 2 studies. The idea is was to look at the area as a whole, kind of understand it as a neighborhood, as an area, try to understand its identity, characteristics, and also future needs. And plan for that. As we know, development would at some point come forward. This is the first application or pre-application that we've had. Previously, the Sears site did come in for some initial research, but they have not submitted anything formally. And the application we have before us for 3805 State, which is the Macy's site, is still in the pre-application phase, and we'll go into that a little bit more. So here's the Upper State Street study, the traffic and circulation and parking study, and the Upper State Street design guidelines. Those are our guiding documents for this area of town. So what this applicant is proposing is just looking at the Macy's site, about 8 acres, and proposing a mixed-use project using state bonus density. What that allows them is to have, yes, additional units. It allows for mixed use of commercial and residential, and then it allows for certain concessions. And this was an important point in staff's review of this project going forward, is that the applicant is seeking a waiver of the height the city's height limit for this site using state density bonus law. So the height is allowed, and we did have that confirmed by city attorney and outside counsel that that is indeed an appropriate allowance under that state bonus density. What they're looking at is 642 residential units, mix of units, and then also a mix of retail, dining, commercial, and some public spaces. As I mentioned, the applicant will go into detail on the site plan and design features. But before we do that, just want to orient yourself, and I said, and also the public, on the steps we have before us. So what today's hearing is about is a pre-application design consultation, which your board is familiar with. These are the intention is to have a single pass or review by a design review board prior to submitting a formal application. And for smaller projects, it can be something as simple as a sketch or a conceptual plan that you're weighing in and getting that design feedback. Is this kind of styling, architectural style appropriate? Is the size, bulk, and scale kind of working or not? And getting that feedback early on before investing into more detailed plans. Obviously, with such a large site and a complex project, it's more than just a napkin sketch. We have, a little bit more of an idea around it. But again, the threshold or what we're looking at today is intended to be of a very conceptual level, just more looking at the layout, size, bulk, and scale, style, those kinds of things at that level. And I say that because there are multiple steps that we're going to be going through just in the pre-application phase alone. So right now they have not submitted a formal application. We're all in the world of not formal, getting informal feedback from the city. And we've already gone through a number of those steps. So the first step this project has gone through is a pre-application review team review. So that's an application to the planning department that gets feedback from all the various land development team divisions. So public works, fire, building, engineering, transportation, planning. All of the divisions and departments take a look at a conceptual package and give kind of big picture red flag issues for an applicant to consider. So this project did that twice. First, they did that in December, submitted that in December 2022. We gave them that feedback via letter. There was a second round of that this past year. They submitted for that late in the year, and we gave that feedback earlier this year in February. So that was just looking at high-level items, services, wastewater, utilities, traffic, circulation, just kind of high-level feedback in terms of what they need to start considering and wrapping into their design. The next step was encouraged by the city, and the applicant was willing to do it. It was an outreach event to the public, to the neighborhood, to just kind of showcase what it is they're thinking for this site and really kind of start the conversation with the neighborhood as far as what the design entails. The next step is where we're at today. So the zoning ordinance requires for large average unit density incentive projects such as this to go through a pre-application stage at the design review boards because we want to encourage and require that early feedback from design in addition to the feedback from city departments. So we have early feedback from fire and building. We also want early feedback on design. And then our next step would be early feedback from the planning commission. So again, during the pre-application stage, they're going to be going similarly to the planning commission next and getting their feedback in a preliminary, in a conceptual way. And then those steps all combined inform their actual formal planning application. So these are all the preliminary steps, and what we expect is that in this summer, we'll receive their formal application. So there's lots of pre-application services and steps ranging from informal to formal. For large projects like this, they become rather formal. But the intention is to get that early feedback from city prior to applying. It also helps the applicant identify problem areas and the city identify problem areas within our own services, and then provides clear direction to the applicant. And it helps ultimately, the goal is to improve the application review process so that we're working together, especially for complex projects. Now I want to touch on what we can expect when this is an application, because this is where I think a lot of the public interest will lie, and I want to be clear as to how we can follow the project get involved, comment, and where it's appropriate to do that, because I think this is an important time to kind of lay out the steps. So the first step, again, once in, let's say, the summer, they submit their application, the first step that we'll see in a public forum is going to be ABR concept review. So you guys will be back at this looking at it, but now as a formal application, again, conceptual level, but your comments will be more, will carry forward in your future hearings, as you guys are familiar. The next kind of step we'll have to achieve is the application completeness review. So we get design review comments, but the other thing is the applicant has to make sure all the plans are meeting zoning standards, even with bonus density waivers, making sure that we're meeting all the criteria of bonus density law, looking at parking, circulation, any kind of city standards that really are required to complete the application, to move it forward. Once we have a complete application, we'll be doing our environmental review. And this, I think, is something also that a lot of the public is interested in, so I wanted to kind of touch on where it falls. So environmental review, I'll touch on in a minute of all the things that are included in that. But just to be clear, we're in our pre-application stages. There's a lot of vetting that needs to be done at each of these steps. And so we're just getting started in that kind of, we'll be getting started in that analysis later. Step 4 would be the decision, so environmental land use approval. And then step 5, it'll be back at your board for project design approval and final design approval. And I also laid out just here on the bottom the expected time. So design review concept can take a few months for them to get their application in and be reviewed by your board on an agenda, noticed, et cetera. Application completeness can take several months depending on, we have a complex project before us, so we'll be working with them on that. Environmental review can take up to a year, depending on the complexity of our project, and we do think this is a complex one. So it's not overnight that this will be, in your backyard. There's a thorough vetting process, but I do want people to stay engaged and know where to insert themselves if they are interested in following the project. Once we get through, Planning Commission will also take, or land use approvals will take a few months. Design review following will take some months. After all that is when the project would then apply for building permits. We have, you'll see in just a moment with the applicant's presentation, 6 buildings that they're looking to design around. That's a lot of building permits, and then there's a general site improvements. So again, that will probably take a fair amount of time to review and get building permits issued if it moves forward in its current configuration. What your board will be charged with more so on when it comes as a formal application, and you guys already know this, is you're looking at the architectural style. Is it appropriate? Looking at massing, roof lines, site layout, building relief, windows, landscaping, how it plays with the street frontage, integration of this site with its neighbors, the livability and the breathing space of the units and how they interplay with the common spaces, how they interplay with the commercial spaces, how open space is used as an appropriate kind of mix and blending, colors and materials, all of those things. There's a lot of details that you always dig into. You'll be digging into similarly here. Because of the large site, we expect that when it's in your hands for concept review, when it's a formal application, we'll probably need a few hearings, right? We won't be able to tackle 6 buildings and all of that kind of finessing in one review. So although today's conceptual or pre-application is kind of a once over a very generic review, when we get to concept review, do expect that it'll probably be at least 3 hearings to kind of break apart. And we'll be in conversations with your chair to kind of understand best how to do that, how to break up the site, and we'll let the applicant kind of weigh in. How do we break this up and make it into manageable, understandable pieces for your board and the public to digest? For those of you in the public that are interested in kind of how this is going to play out in terms of logistics, how does this site work? What kind of how does this development play into the existing mall? How is it going to function? How is parking for the existing mall going to work with the new proposal? What's traffic going to look like? How is circulation going to work? Are they going to put in a street? Where do the people walk? Where do bikes go? Where does the bus go? All of those things. Where does waste management go? Where do stormwater and drainage go on site? infrastructure, building code requirements, all that is vetted during the completeness phase, right, that I talked about. So that's a staff level review. But at any time, so Patsy Price will be taking the project forward. So for those of you interested in those kind of details, that's what will be fleshed out during the planning application review with staff in conjunction with all of our other departments, working out with the applicant. So if those are things you're interested in, you can reach out to the planner during that phase and help kind of understand where the project is at. For those interested or kind of more wanting to know more about resource impacts, whether the environmental review is, we follow the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA process. That looks at all issue areas, everything from biological, soils, air quality, water quality, noise, recreation, the city's utility and service systems, what impacts this project would have on those, what impacts it has on population, on housing, transportation, hazards, and our public services like fire and police services. How would this project, how does it play in with our existing services? All of that is thoroughly vetted and looked at during the environmental review process. So first we study what potential impacts could this project have, and this is true of all projects. Does this project have the potential to have impacts on any of these things? And if the answer is yes, it might, then we determine how those impacts need to be addressed. And we do that through the CEQA process. So if that's where your interest lies, I want you to just understand that that's the phase that we are vetting out those kinds of issues. What to expect in terms of the public hearing process when we are in the formal application stage. So this project was subject to standard noticing. Standard noticing happens the first hearing every time, and so for instance, your first conceptual review, a notice will go out. If your board takes 3 times at concept review to make those comments because of all the buildings, we won't notice each of those 3. It's just the first concept review. At the end of the meeting, you would say, we're going to continue this item to a date certain, right? And so you wouldn't, if you were an interested party, you wouldn't receive a second notice. It's up to you to follow the project and what happened at the last hearing. That said, when it goes to, if it goes to Planning Commission, that Planning Commission hearing is the first Planning Commission hearing would similarly be noticed. And then the first hearing back for project design approval would also be noticed. So the Planning Commission hearing for concept review would be noticed as well, our next step. So just wanted to kind of clarify, we do notice at each step, but if those items are continued, that continued hearing isn't noticed. If you are interested in getting notices, the city, as a standard noticing measure, we mail out notice postcards to everyone within 300 feet of a project or interested parties that have provided mailing addresses because they are mailed out. So if you don't provide a mailing address, you will not receive a notice. You need to provide that. Agendas are posted in all public areas, and then we email out agendas for the meetings. So if you are either on the city's e-subscription for ABR or Planning Commission, you'll get an emailed agenda, or if you're an interested party that's provided your email address, you will receive an email agenda. I recommend you do both if you're interested in following the project. We also have other standard noticing of notice placards and legal ads in the paper. And for AUD projects, when it comes in for a formal application, they'll also be posting a rendering of the project on the site. Kind of help people who are walking by the site know how to get involved. Online, you'll find all of our hearing schedules, agendas, drawings, staff reports, minutes. So we post all of our materials online for easy access. If you're interested in commenting, you can do so via email, in person at any of our public hearings, or virtually through Zoom participation. These meetings today included are both broadcasted on television, Cox Channel 18. It's also available for online streaming, but do know that the online streaming option is just viewing only. It's not the participation through Zoom. So we also have virtual participation through Zoom. And then also the videos are recorded and are archived and posted online. So if you're interested in catching up on a meeting, you also have the ability to do so. All decisions that have an action, so today there will be no action and the Planning Commission will not have action at their next hearing, but when it's a formal application, those actions are appealable within 10 calendar days. Lastly, we've prepared a project website just because we know we'll have interest, so you can follow along with what the status of the project is on there. And if you would like to be added as an interested party, just email the ABR secretary at santabarbaraca.gov and provide your name, email, and mailing address. So again, today's step is in the pre-application phase. And the focus of our review today is to provide initial feedback on the broad issues of the project: architectural style, size, bulk, and scale, compatibility in a general sense, neighborhood context, looking to our Upper State Street design guidelines. So that concludes staff's presentation. If you have any questions, I'm here.
Thank you, Ms. Arciniega. All right, I think we will move into our applicant presentation. So if they'd like to come forward, you will have 25 minutes today to be presenting. And so just introduce yourself and you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan, and good afternoon, board and staff. My name is Jim Taylor. My son Matthew and I are part of MCP La Cumbra that owns a good portion, about half of La Cumbra Plaza. We are we're the people that are going to be redeveloping the project and go through the process that Megan has identified. My family moved to Santa Barbara in 1963 from Chicago. When we arrived, the freeway was still being constructed north of town, above the stoplights, and La Cumbra Plaza was still just an orchard and a dairy. So I watched La Cumbra Plaza being built in 1966, and then watched it thrive for 50 some odd years as an area that really energized the north end of town. However, 60 years after it was built, it's really reached the end of its useful life as a mall, but it does present a really, in our view, unique opportunity to be redeveloped into housing and some market-appropriate retail. What you're going to be hearing this afternoon is our proposal to redevelop the front portion of the property, about 8.7 acres, roughly a city block, that's currently occupied by the Macy's store and parking. We have assembled, in my view, a wonderful team, and what you're going to see this afternoon is more than 2 years of effort on our part to get it to this point. And we welcome your feedback, and I'm sure we'll be getting plenty of it as time goes on. So thank you very much for your time. I'm going to introduce Brian Kernall now, our architect.
Thank you, Jim. Brian Kernall. So this is a 500-foot square city block superimposed over the property. As Jim mentioned, he and his partners own the front 15 acres of the northern 15 acres. Of that, almost 7 acres is basically under the mall lease, which goes for 53 years until 2077. The southern parcel, by the way, the old Sears site, owned by the original owners, Riviera Dairy family, and this property is also encumbered by that same mall lease until 2077. So the reality is that redevelopment of La Cumbra Plaza can only occur in phases over time. Our 8.5 acres constitutes essentially a block and a half of the city, and will be the first phase, basically, of this redevelopment of La Cumbra Plaza. The housing element has designated 1,900 units for this overall 30-acre site. So what you'll see today is essentially 1/3 of that goal and 1/3 of the site. So here is a 500-foot city block. Thank you. I appreciate it. Here's a 500 city block, basically downtown at Paseo Nuevo. Anytime you look at a block downtown, what you see is multiple buildings with paseos and open space. That's something that you basically see throughout the world. In fact, if I took a 500 square foot block to scale and imposed it over Granada Spain, you can see again, multiple buildings with paseos and open space. So, this has been our inspiration essentially for beginning a new uptown. Re-envisioning an aging department store and a big hole in the ground into a neighborhood at the corner of State and Hope, made up of multiple buildings with paseos and open space. You'll see we've created a neighborhood with different architectural styles because this is not downtown, it's uptown. And we've created a neighborhood that connects to the existing mall, which eventually will be more blocks and more housing and different uses as it evolves to the south. My very talented partner, Christine Perrone, has led our design effort. Christine and I knew from the very beginning that we couldn't do this alone, that it needed multiple hands, just as a block would need multiple buildings to be successful. We've long been impressed with David Baker Architects in the Bay Area, DBA, especially their thoughtful design and of beautiful places. We've had the opportunity to collaborate with them, and we felt that they'd be the perfect partner for us on this project. So I'd like to introduce one of my favorite architects, Daniel Simons, who is a principal at DBA and a fellow in the American Institute of Architects, who will share with you some additional inspiration before turning it over to Christine, his associate, Chelsea Johnson, and along with Vicki Lee of APT Design, our landscape architects, who will share with you our vision.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me here. So as Brian said, I'm Daniel Simons of David Baker Architects. We're a firm that's been around about 40 years with a real focus on housing, especially kind of dense urban housing. And we were so into housing, we even wrote a book about housing. This is called 9 Ways to Make Housing for People. If anybody wants a copy, let me know and I'll send you one. But at the core of it is really this idea about it's for people. And that sort of human-centric design is something that we bring to all the projects that we work on. So that means not just thinking about the future residents, but also talking to the current residents. So we had this great community meeting where over 300 people came and talked to us about the project. So I'm obviously not from Santa Barbara, although my sister does live here. And so I had the opportunity to really hear with the neighbors, and then we have this great collaboration, like Brian said, with Christine and Brian, that really sort of helps us understand where we're belonging and what the project should be like. One of the things that's really amazing about Santa Barbara, as you all know, is that the weather is incredible. And the outdoor spaces, I think, are in some ways more important than the indoor spaces in the building. The idea of these buildings that we're creating, they create really wonderful outdoor spaces. So thinking about the nature of those spaces and how the buildings can frame them, the negative spaces in the site plan become just as important as the buildings. One of the 9 ways is that it's important for buildings to be welcoming, so having a really great front door, something that brings you into the project and welcomes you home. I think on that outdoor space, also thinking through the idea that these outdoor spaces are going to they're going to be around for a really long time, and designing them for flexibility. It may have originally intended to be outdoor seating, it can also be a play structure, or eventually become maybe even a restaurant. So while we do a huge amount of housing, we don't just do housing, and we bring that sort of people-centric design to everything we do. So whether it's hotels or a place to meet with your friend after work and get a drink, a good place for coffee, or taking a few parking spaces out of a parking lot and turning it into an ice cream stand. All of these things come back to this idea of really making livable and wonderful spaces for people. And we are super excited to be able to do that here in Santa Barbara. So with that introduction, I'm going to hand it over to Chelsea in our office, who's going to dive a little bit more into the details.
Thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon, board members. So as Brian introduced earlier, we're going from this large existing block that was essentially designed around the car and a lot of surface parking. And what we've done through a collaborative process with Cornell Collective and EPT Design is that we worked very closely together over many, many iterations to create a collection of 6 distinct buildings on the site. As we were developing the building form, we were consistently looking at the void spaces in between the buildings to create wonderful public outdoor spaces for the community. So you'll see here what we've created is a walking neighborhood with pedestrian paseos, courtyards, nooks and crannies, reminiscent of the pedestrian paseos that are so beloved in Santa Barbara. Here you're zooming into our site plan where we have a mix of diverse uses to activate the public outdoor spaces. And we've achieved this walking neighborhood by pushing all of the residential parking underground, which is a tremendous achievement and really helps make these outdoor places for the community sing and prioritize people over cars. So these are ramps down to the underground parking, where we've taken advantage of the existing depression in the existing site for pushing the parking subgrade. And here you see that what this has achieved is a walking neighborhood for people where we're prioritizing people over cars. And with that, I'll hand it off to Christine.
Thanks, Chelsea. I'm going to walk you through some of the uses we're imagining on the ground level. And to start with is our walkable new retail core. That's going to be connecting people from State Street through a sequence of paseos and our central plaza, and really connect all the way down to La Cumbre Lane, Plaza Lane, which will be a new plaza, and integrate into the existing outdoor mall to our south. It was really important to us to maintain the connection to the existing mall. You'll notice the size of these retail spaces. We aim for smaller retail spaces, really looking for local businesses and businesses that could cater to the needs of these new residents in this new neighborhood. We did include 2 garages. This is for the commercial space, retail space, for people visiting this new neighborhood, for ease of parking. And then the yellow is new residential on the ground floor, and Chelsea's going to talk to you more in detail about the residences facing State Street. And then a lot of support services, lobbies and circulation and large bike rooms and work spaces for people living on the site, and a dog washing hub, and all kinds of things we're imagining for the people living here. And then the completion, and then I think to finish out the ground floor plane, we're going to have Vicki Lee from EPT Design come up and talk you through the paseos.
Thank you, Christine. I'll be talking about the landscape design for this project. So the overall design intent for the outdoor spaces is centered on walkability and creating a family-oriented neighborhood. So to achieve this, we've proposed fine textured hardscape material and a series of garden-like courtyards and plaza spaces. Building on the north-south spine, we've also introduced feature paving and guiding paving bands meandering through the paseo to act as a way-finding strategy to really bring people in and help them navigate through the paseo. Here is an overarching framework of the site showcasing a variety of open space typologies and pedestrian connections. So as you can see that along the north-south spine, we've proposed public plazas, so featuring 1 central plaza for large gatherings and 2 community plazas for small gatherings. And residential private courtyards are nestled within the building. So we'll be talking about each type in the subsequent slides. Central Plaza. So the Central Plaza is going to become the heart of this new neighborhood and will become a dynamic community gathering place. It's about 120 feet by 80 feet in size. It's open and flexible, but also being anchored by a large specimen tree and a raised lawn deck in the center. This is a diagram illustrating the flexibility the design offers. On a daily basis, it offers space for retail spill-out and small gatherings. For special occasions like the farmers markets or community movie nights, it allows for the setup of like market booths, food trucks, movable tables and chairs. A projection screen can be easily positioned on the side of the building for a fun outdoor movie night in the summer. Community plazas are designed as an extension of the Central Plaza, offering more flexible open spaces, a variety of seating opportunities, as well as greenery for small gatherings and hangouts. It also has the potential to incorporate public art to create a sense of identity. Public passeos and corridors are really designed to strengthen the pedestrian connections from this new neighborhood to the wider urban context. That you can see that the retail spine from north to south, it meanders and connects to the existing paseo at the shopping mall to the south. We've also introduced fine-grained pavement, planters, greenery to really offer the comfort and shade for the pedestrians. And then the design of the paseo pays homage to the meandering nature of the paseo design often seen in downtown Santa Barbara. Here is the tree strategy as an important layer of the site design. As you can see that colorful gateway trees are positioned at the entry points to the site, creating a sense of identity and as a wayfinding as well. Specimen trees shown in yellow help define plaza and courtyard spaces. Avenues of more upright, evergreen or semi-evergreen trees are positioned along the paseos and corridors. All those trees together offer shade and helping to elevate the qualities of outdoor spaces and making them more walkable. Again, this is the overall ground level site plan, really illustrating the intentional layering of design concept and strategies I just shared. I will now pass it over to Christine to walk you through the architecture design of the upper level. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chair Anderson, I think I will go ahead and warn you, we'll probably be requesting an additional 5 minutes, I can see from our clock. Thank you. Now that we've covered the ground floor plane, I just want to walk you through the thinking behind the massing for this project and quickly walk you through the upper levels. We knew when we started this project, it was important to provide this new housing for Santa Barbara. We knew it was going to be important that we do so in a neighborhood that is focused on pedestrian paseos and plazas and breaking down the architecture into smaller building pieces. And we also knew that we wanted to respect our surrounding neighborhood with smaller scale elements. So you can see the perimeter, especially at State and Hope, is under 4 stories, and that we've internalized the 5th story and the 6th story to the site. I'm just going to quickly go through these. Level 2, level 3, 4. Level 5, you see, significantly starts to step back. And then 6 is really internalized, and you can see the red outline of Macy's there for reference. Want to present one of our site sections for you during this presentation. You can see there with the black arrow. And so that's the overall site section. And I want to focus today on the State Street. You can see we do have a one-story apartments lining State Street, and that the 4th floor is held back over 30 feet. The 5th floor is held back over 60 feet. And the 6th floor is held back over 100 feet with a little bit closer there, but still largely about 100 feet. We also took the time to analyze some of the mountain views with the project, and especially from public view corridors, and selected 2 opportunities on La Cumbre that as a vantage point from the public. And what you're going to be seeing in these views is the Bristol Farms, the gas station on La Cumbre, and the Habit. And then that's our project. So here's the rendering, and what you can see is that's the 6-story massing shown behind. And you see in the foreground the gas station, the Habit, Bristol Farms, and then the mountains beyond. And then a similar study a little bit farther down on La Cumbre. Same thing. There's the 6-story that you see. Just quickly, here's our designations. If you hear us talking about C1 or A1, these are the building designations. And I'm going to walk you through C1 and C2 for the architecture. And starting with the corner at State and Hope. And just zooming in, we are imagining this as a classic Santa Barbara buildings, both C1 and C2. White plaster, red tile roofs, wrought iron balconies, Santa Barbara sandstone. This is stepping down State Street. You're going to get a glimpse of the Paseo. So this is looking down State Street, and there you see the Paseo on the right. And you do see that indentation on State Street. That is a new right-hand turn lane that this project is including in our proposal. Then going down Hope Avenue, looking at the driveway entrance between the 2 buildings. And here you can see the significant break between the 2 buildings. And a close-up, using the balconies as loggias and design techniques that you would expect, awnings and wrought iron balconies and red tile roofs. And then looking at the main entry to building C2, this does have a couple parking spaces, short-term guest parking spaces at the front with, will be very lushly landscaped. And again, arched arcade, a wood-framed loggia above. I'm just going to quickly walk you down the elevations. Here we are at State and Hope. Here we are at the mid-block, what we were just looking at. And finally, this is the southernmost edge of the building C2. And I think you'll notice right away it's less developed architecturally than the other portions. And that has a reason. After our community outreach meeting, we heard a lot of comments about needing more outdoor space, park for kids to play in, the outdoor functions. So we're really now considering not including this last southern section of building, but turning this into a park. And that's why it's less developed. And the overall plan, and now I'm going to turn this back over to Chelsea to walk you through Building A.
Thank you, Christine. So I'm going to show you a few really early conceptual images to share with you where our design is headed. David Baker Architects is designing these 3 buildings in yellow. And I'm going to take you along State Street, first at the level of pedestrian, and then zooming out a little bit more. So first, zooming into this west area of State Street, where we have located 1-story mezzanine loft residential units. Here's a zoom in. And these units are 1 stories. They have a mezzanine sleeping area with a kitchen and bathroom under the mezzanine. And we thought this was a really nice, appropriate residential type facing State Street. And we've recognized that residences facing State Street need to be really thoughtfully considered given the busyness of the street. So we've set them back a range of 12, 15, and 19 feet with a deep landscape buffer. And we've further broken down the massing by giving each their own courtyard entry. We are really inspired by Meridian Studios and how you walk off the sidewalk through a gate and into a courtyard before entering your unit, and thought it'd be great to propose something similar here. So what you're seeing in this 3D sketch is a garden entry and giving these units a sense of peaceful entry into their units off this busy street. We're proposing white cement plaster, a glazed brick tile wainscoting, corten details like around window fins and a corten gate with vines for the entry, and Santa Barbara sandstone for the low landscape walls. So what we're really focusing on in terms of our material palette is prioritizing natural, authentic materials that are very complementary to Cornell Collective's architecture and the contextual with the city of Santa Barbara. Now walking further down State Street, we're seeing the intersection of the north-south Paseo. And you see in this image, on the right-hand side are those one-story live-work lofts that I just presented. It allows the upper story volumes to be set back quite significantly from the back of the sidewalk. So the 4-story element on the right-hand side is set back 33 feet. And then you see a hint of the Paseo with an arcade. Now we're taking a step back and looking across the street from Plaza Avenue and State Street. So what you see here is the white cement plaster volumes in the middle, bracketed with a terracotta tile on the left-hand side in the distance, and on the corner, a glazed brick tile with a lot of textural variety and tone. And now looking from across the street to the Paseo entry, it's just a further back view of the terracotta tile on the left-hand side with cement plaster bays and the one-story volumes on the right. The elevation as a whole, and you can see how the Paseos and podium courtyards are oriented to really break up the mass facing State Street. And now, briefly, we're walking into the center of the site where you're walking into this first intimate courtyard. We've really crafted the ground level in collaboration with Cornell Collective to create a diversity of retail spaces to help enliven the public realm. So here you see micro retail for local businesses, outdoor dining spilling out from the restaurant, further activating the space. And finally, we're at the heart of the project, the public core, where this space is surrounded with vibrant retail. Again, prioritizing one-story volumes that protrude from the upper story massing that allow for residential courtyards, residential private open space above, plantings that spill over the edge. And with that, I wanted to say thank you and look forward to your questions and comments.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, before we move into public comment, do we know about how many we're looking at?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. At this time, we have 2 speaker slips.
Oh,
And I actually got one more to add.
3 speaker slips.
Okay. I think we can,
Be sure to let them know the contact.
yeah. Okay, and we're going to move into public comment, but just before that too, I just want to reiterate what our board is focused on, and that's mainly aesthetics. So again, if you can direct your public comments to mass bulk and scale, to the architectural style, to neighborhood compatibility, that would be much appreciated. A lot of the planning issues you can talk about at Planning Commission, and a lot of the environmental issues will be fleshed out during the planning review. So let's go ahead and open public comment.
All right, thank you, Chair Anderson. Like I mentioned, at this time, we do have 3 speaker slips, so we'll go ahead and start with Assad Mora. If you could make your way up to the podium, you'll have 2 minutes to speak, and after that, we'll have Nicholas Storr.
Assad Mora, I'm a business owner. My wife and I are dentists. We've been in town for 30 years in the upper state area. And one of the biggest problems we have is housing for our employees. So they have to come from Lompoc and Santa Maria and some other places because of affordability. So we're very happy and we're very supportive of having housing development in the neighborhood that could provide with some valuable employees, which, the housing issue is the hardest thing for them. So we appreciate and we're supporting this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next, we have Nicholas Storr, and on deck, we'll have Michael Rassler. Okay, we'll have, there you are. You're good. Go ahead.
Hello, my name's Nick. I live close to the project, less than a mile. I support it. I think we need both more housing and specifically more like mixed-use housing that allows people to live, car-free or car-light. But I'll talk about that more at the planning meeting. And I really like the aesthetics. I think it fits well with Santa Barbara, with the Spanish colonial style. And it looks like a really pleasant place to both live and for people that live nearby to hang out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next, we have Michael Rossler, and then after that, we'll have Bonnie Elliott.
Thank you. My name's Michael Rassler. I've been very active in the Santa Barbara nonprofit community for the last 15 years, serving as a CEO of a couple of different agencies that provide direct care and services to many members of our community. I wanted to speak to the project in three basic areas. In addition to the tremendous need for housing that we have, at present I am the CEO president at Hillside, and like we just heard, a number of our direct care employees have to come from quite a ways away, and God forbid there's a tragedy and they can't get to town, as we've had Thomas fires and the recent rains. Our own residents, our own community members struggle for services that they desperately need. I think the design is great. Conceptually, it's like almost any other neighborhood, and I've been fortunate enough to travel around the world. I just think it's fantastic. It's visually stimulating with a variety of different elevations. I think that it's so close to so much that walking or bicycling, let alone what they put inside, this new neighborhood themselves, it's just a great location for this much housing and this many more people to be at the upper state area. And I think it is transformational. I think it's going to be phenomenal. And in my career, in my business, change is always fraught with a certain degree of resistance, always. And change happens in typically one of two ways. Revolutionarily, we wake up the next day and we're doing things differently, or evolutionarily, whereas we see in this project, we move into it and grow it organically. And I think the evolution of Santa Barbara would be incomplete and missing without this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next, we'll have Bonnie Elliott, if you'd like to make your way up to the podium.
Hello, my name is Bonnie Elliott, and I live at 251 South Hope Avenue. And I wanted to tell you, the first thing I want to tell you is that several friends of mine and I were going to come to this meeting today, and they all said, "Oh, Bonnie, it's been canceled. The ABR's meeting's been canceled." And so I looked online, and yes, it says it's been canceled. But then I called a friend of mine who works at Channel 18, and he says, "No, it's on." So I'm here, and my friends missed it. So that I wanted to know what the heck that was about. Also, the project itself is way too big. Yes, we need more housing. I get that. I've been here 40 years. But it needs to be cut way back. There's not enough. One of the things that was said earlier was when they met in the plaza. Was that they're going to have two people, probably two people per unit, or one person, but they're going to have allow for one or two cars. And I'm worried about the parking and things like that. And what about little kids? I hope there's enough room for them. And what about going to school and things like that? So, anyway, thank you. I think it needs a lot more thought and planning. So, and I really want to hope it cuts down, you cut it down to half the size. It does not need to have 640 units. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I don't have any further speaker slips, and I'm not seeing any movement, so we'll go ahead and move to virtual public comment. I do see a few hands raised already, so we'll go ahead and start with Alex Gravenor. I'm going to go ahead and give you the ability to speak, and you'll just have to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I'm just here to throw in my hat for this being a great project, and honestly, I think it's a good template for the rest of the city. It's good, it's dense. I think a big part of aesthetics and review that this board does is what's the quality of life of residents that are going to be living in the area and living in the project. And frankly, I think that this is one of the best places to be living in the city with retail nearby, lots of walkability. So I hope that we can keep focused on that big picture and not get worried about slightly obscured sightlines of mountains and things like that. And just keep the big picture in mind that this is going to be a great place to live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next, we'll have Sullivan Israel. We're unable to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I was saying hi, my name's Sully Israel. I help head up the group Strongtown Santa Barbara, and I'm happy to say that both I and all of our members are in full support of this project. We absolutely love the amount of housing being created here, the location, the fact that it's reusing a rather empty parking lot. Even on Black Friday, actually, when it took pictures, and it wasn't even half full. So it's a great potential to change this land use for something that could really be useful for locals, for people that want to be locals who already work here. As far as the aesthetics are concerned, I think it's a really beautiful project, especially along State Street. I don't know if any of you have ever walked on that stretch of State Street. I actually hadn't until I went over there to take pictures because there's nothing there. So it's just very sunny. The sidewalk is very narrow. There's no reason to really be there. And this project, you know, it's going to have multiple storefronts there. I really love the concept of the sort of work-live lofts as well that sort of stick out from the buildings, that it has not a completely flat facade, but it has some visual interest. And I can imagine that it will enliven the street with people coming in and out. And the Central Plaza is absolutely beautiful too, and will really create a reason for people to hang out there. So we're fully in support of the project in its current size. We have no problem with that. In fact, we really like that. And so we'd love to see it go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
And lastly, we have Steve Fort.
Hi, yes. My name is Steve Fort. My wife and I live on Grove Lane, and we did submit a letter that I won't repeat. I hope that the ABR had a chance to look at our comments. And, you know, we're in support of the housing, in support of the project and of housing on the site. We think it makes a lot of sense. Some of the things I focused on in my letter, and I did hear in the presentation, and I was happy to hear, is about public spaces and streetscapes are some of the things that we think are really important to make this project an amenity for all of Upper State Street and really help revitalize the area. So that was it. And I was also happy to hear about discussion about a park being studied. So thank you for your time. And I know there's a great team put together here. And we have a lot of faith that a good project will come out of it. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I don't see any further hands raised, but we did receive written correspondence from Kathy Patmore, Nina Meyer, and Stephen Celia Fort, which were distributed to the board prior to the meeting. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Anderson.
Great. And seeing no other hands, we will close public comment. All right. Typically, we move into questions. Does anyone need a quick break? Are you guys good? Good. All right. We're going to move into questions from the board. So depending on the question, I guess that'll depend on who comes up to the mic, huh? Okay. So would Board Member 6 like to start us off with questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. A lot of these questions are in regards to the quality of the livability of the interior spaces and so forth in a roundabout way. So it might not be apparent that that's my goal. But my first question is, in the unit type distribution, I see that the different types and sizes of units are more or less spread equally throughout the project. If you look on third and fourth and the housing floors, there's all different sizes of units, but they're all spread. Was there any thought to grouping smaller units into several buildings to achieve a greater internal building density and a more distinct building appearance from the others?
Well, yes, thank you, Board Member Six. We are looking at exactly that. We didn't look at. We are looking at. Yeah, we are studying for the Building B, which we did not cover today, knowing we had just so much to cover. I focused on State and Hope. But for Building B, we're looking at smaller scale units. So we're trying to create that kind of diversity of housing stock that will be desirable at this location.
So what I'm trying to get at, trying to see is if some of these buildings could be very distinct and squeezed, and because they're all the similar units, they're much more dense, so it backs away from, the crowding of the, public spaces.
Well, can I answer that
Yes.
question? What we were looking at here was, it's interesting that you're thinking about it this way. What we looked at is we started with the paseos and wanting these paseos to be somewhat narrow because of that experience of like a 30-foot wide paseo. If you walk around Santa Barbara, they're tighter and closer. And we studied a lot of buildings in Granada, Spain, and other regions where it looked really successful. So that's we started the other way around, where we wanted some of that closeness so that then it opens up into our big plaza or it carves down again. We do have some wider ones. We have a diversity of experiences. So to the extent that it would alter the buildings, I don't know that that's our intent for what we're trying to capture with the experience of walking through those paseos.
Okay, thanks. Can you put up on the screen your amenities, the purples and so forth? Can you explain, what are those going to be exercise gyms? Are they going to be open to the public? Are they going to be as opposed to retail? What are those amenities going to be about? Again, this is kind of a roundabout to another goal. So all those in purple?
I'm getting to a laser pointer to help I don't want to go through all of them.
No.
But just to give you an idea, here is bike parking, and we've put a lot of thought and energy into providing substantial bike parking for the residents. Here is conference rooms and an ability for working spaces for the residents. Right here is that dog hub, for pets and kind of an outdoor dog park right here. These are, I know this is a leasing office. What you're seeing over here is conference rooms as well. I think we were struggling with State and Hope Corner, trying to put residential there. So we opted to make that a space to the benefit of the residents in the lobby.
So what's the big one?
And then the big one is still being broken down.
Is that my daughter's dance hall?
The big one is going to be, because there's not the upper level amenity space for this project, so this is going to be probably the gym, spaces that could spill out onto that courtyard. This one is still being studied a bit.
So primarily it's for the residences?
That's right.
The residents that live there?
That's
Okay,
right.
Thanks. So with that, I see with the distribution, especially retail, that was there I see a lack, I'll just go here. Did you study, there seems to be a lack of synergy between the existing retail around, that like, I don't see a strong connection. Maybe you can talk me out of it with the existing spine of La Cumbra down sheet and the strip mall, the strip retail, Chipotle and Panda and so forth. They seem to be, the project seems to be turned away, or not a lot of synergy or connection in that regards to the retail that you're developing.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That was definitely going to be in the presentation, why we did this, but we wanted to be sensitive to time. Again, we thought about this a lot, and we wanted to create a retail experience that was a walking experience. The experience you have at Plaza Avenue with the strip mall is a street. It's not very walkable. It's going to be less walkable. So what we did is decide to line that with live-work units, similar to the ones that Chelsea introduced to you on State Street. So those could be live-work. Those could have small shops. They could flex over time. But present it that way so that we are creating a new retail experience. We were very, very sensitive to the idea of how we relate to the existing Lure restaurant. And that's why you see what we show there is a plaza experience that they still get to enjoy. And that was important to us, that that's a fire lane, but we are using bollards to separate that off so that can maintain that very pedestrian feel. And that was also a part of this meandering paseo sequence that we felt was very important to connect to the existing outdoor mall. So we felt that this was the best solution for creating retail in a modern way, retail that is experiential, that is in a walking neighborhood, and that's why we felt pretty strongly that this was the better approach. We did not try to line much along State Street, just because it's not doing very well, honestly, along State Street retail. So we chose to create this new retail experience.
So again, the meandering way you get to the spine of the existing, back up, when is, you're probably going to redevelop the center portion of this after the leases are up, and when is that?
That's in 2077.
So it's way off, okay. So,
we do think that this new neighborhood is going to help really revitalize the existing mall.
I'm excited about that. But again, can you explain, let's keep it in the question phase, can you explain the connection between the existing spine and the more walkable retail paseo of your new project? It seems to jog radically along La Cumbra Plaza Lane, and kind of, I see you're aligning with the Lure, that's great, but it seems like it's turning away from the main spine.
It is hard to draw on this like that. That did not work. Thought I'd have my nifty pen to show you, but yeah. So it's definitely, coming from State Street. We see people, parking here, and we have strong connections into the.
I don't need to go all the way through there. I'm just interested in downsheet between the existing La Cumbra spine and your.
Here, and this is here, and then you go up here.
Is there any consideration of a stronger link between those two?
We looked at it at one point and had it more lined up. And after rewalking a lot of our own paseos in downtown Santa Barbara, what I was really seeing is it's interesting that it's not a straight shot. And I think some of the struggles, in all honesty, in my opinion, of the existing walking mall is it is that kind of straight shot without interest. So in the end, we decided to make it a bit of a jog to create that sequence of changes, not a straight shot. That was purposeful.
Okay. So this is, I'm concerned about the, can you, this is probably a pretty typical question, but, and probably early, but how do you assure healthy, significant trees in the spaces over the occupied areas? And did you consider garage voids where you would have a void and contain the soil
Yes.
down to Mother Earth?
That's our expectation, is to do that so that we can get some substantial trees planted.
So right now, it's just a concept of those. I see very continuous garage,
Many of the
especially
parking
above.
spaces will disappear and be turned into planters, but at this concept level, we haven't done that.
And full voids all
Yeah.
the way down to Mother Earth for
That's
those
right.
trees. Okay, great.
That's right.
When you mentioned that you were considering the South C2 building going away,
Just
can you
this part.
explain that further?
This section right there.
Yeah, the one finger.
Yeah, it's that finger. And that's roughly, I think it's like 120 by 80, 85 feet. So it's a substantial park space. And we decided that was an ideal location for it, given its,
Ideal location for what?
for a park.
Oh, for the park, so it goes away.
Yeah, that was that last piece of architecture on C2 that was less developed because we were really after the community outreach meeting, and we heard that from a number of participants that they felt we needed additional outdoor space, especially aimed for children, so we thought this would be a great location to accomplish that.
And are you concerned of picking up the balance of the units lost? And how, if so, how would you do that?
From when you've seen this and the amount of work that's happened since, we've already done some of that redesign and thought about it, and we don't have a concern for it we're not having to add additional massing, I think is your concern, and we're not needing to do that to keep our count up, our unit count up.
Okay. All right. I think those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Six. We'll go to Vice Chair Whalen. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. First, a couple of 2-3 questions for staff, clarifications. I'm sure myself and other members spent all weekend trying to digest the guidelines as well as the project. I wasn't clear about the setbacks on State Street. It says 10 feet, it says 20 feet. Can you clarify that at all for me?
Thank you, Chair. Board Member Whalen, I'm trying to recall. Yeah.
Pop quiz.
Because it's been, 2 years since the initial PRT letter. My recollection is that the State Street setbacks do not apply.
Oh, I thought we were talking about the pedestrian master plan?
No.
Okay.
Here it is.
This is the Upper State Street Design Guidelines.
Oh, right, because it is, so the Upper State Street setbacks do not apply because it's an AUD project, average unit density incentive, and those zoning requirements trump the Upper State Street ones. So if you recall in that program, there are reduced setbacks to allow for mixed-use buildings, so their front setback for that is 10 feet, and then interior is 0 as a mixed-use project.
Thank you. Very clear. And then also in those design guidelines on page 41, the ones you just handed out here, let's see, I think it's the document page 319 or 320, I'm not sure. It has a large green dot at the northeast corner of the site that isn't listed in the legend. What be that dot?
Yeah, thank you. Board member, so that is listed, it's green, so it's the color green, which is in the legend, which is open space, park, plaza, and creek corridor improvements. So the idea being that the color green is, McKinsey Park is the existing, the other green are not existing, so the other being the trail that you see there in green. And then the green dot on this property. So the Upper State Street study and design guidelines consider or contemplate the fact that there's need for public space or open public parks in this area of town, that there aren't existing public parks to serve residents. It's kind of a park desert, if you will. So the closest being McKinsey, which is about a mile away. And so the green dot is supposed to be representative. It's not that it has to occur on that corner. The idea is that there should be a park space in this side of that study area contemplated, and that's what the design guidelines get into. So had we been reviewing the redevelopment of La Cumbre Plaza as a whole, that dot, or that representative park area could be maybe placed through somewhere throughout any of the parcels. Since this project is coming in first and we won't see the others for quite some time, that needs to be kind of addressed in their application. So that was one of the comments that staff identified in our initial review, was we do have to address that design guideline requirement. And we also heard, as the applicant team mentioned at the outreach meeting, that echoed by the community, of wanting to see more public park space. Of course, it's a little bit in conflict with then resident open space, right? So private to the residents is opposite of then open to everybody. So that was one of the things we've identified, is there needs to be both. So there needs to be the amenity spaces required for the residents, but then also per the design guidelines, something public, a public recreational amenity in this region, in this side of the State Street area.
Well, the implication by the color and by some of your words too is that this is plant material, but if I understand you correctly, it could really be as open space, it could be hardscape or planting area.
Right, this goes towards recreation, yes.
As long as it's towards recreation. Thank you, that clarifies that point. And then, Ms. Perrone or anyone from the design team I'm sorry, I don't have the page number. Could you tell me what the difference between amenity and commercial is on your use designation diagrams? Is amenity for those people living on the site? Do I have that right?
That's correct. The amenity space, and we are capturing quite a bit of different uses for this because of our early concept phases, and we'd have run out of colors if we kept trying to identify everything. But what you're seeing here are lobby spaces, bike rooms. Like I said, we really are focusing on large-scale bike rooms, given our goals for being a pedestrian, multimodal neighborhood. You're seeing, like I said, a dog washing hub and dog park at one location, a place for conference rooms and for working. If you're working on site, it's a work hub type situation. And those are some of the requests we've heard from talking to people in town about the project.
Sure, along with dog washing, is there any like clothes washing, laundromat facilities, or is that too deep in the weeds right now?
A little too deep in the weeds right now.
Okay. Let's see, I have some other things for...
But not too deep for dog washing. That was a priority.
Right. Got to take care of the dogs. As opposed to Mr. Six, who addressed many internal things, I'm going to talk about the external things. At that State Street pedestrian entry, is there any envisioning for a bus stop? It has two little signatures there of drop. Has there been any discussions about a major bus eyebrow turnout along State for the project? I would think that busing would be a major part of your concept.
Yes, absolutely. Having good access to public transport is a priority. And we are actively in discussion with transportation. We have a meeting with them tomorrow, actually, where one of our agenda topics is this very item. But it's still very early. We don't really know where it'll land.
Okay, thank you. And working my way around the site, do you have something else, Mr. Cornell?
Yeah, I just want to mention, there is the Barry Burkus bus stop that's just down the way.
Palm trees.
The palm trees.
Can't forget it.
And then there is the one right across Hope in front of the mixed-use building that's there. So transportation staff and MTD, we've talked about putting a bus stop here and doing away possibly with the one there that is on the eastern side of Hope. But, those are pretty close. So that's the question, and it's going to be resolved with transportation.
Thank you. And then there is an existing garage ramp on Hope Avenue, and it appears that it's in the same place, but is it really? Or are you reworking it, rebuilding it, relocating it? This serves the Macy's, I would think, loading area.
That's right. It's not exactly in the same location. I believe it ended up being a little bit to the north, but we're talking like 10 feet difference, largely in the same location.
So it is going to get demoed and rebuilt.
Right. With all the subterranean parking that we're providing, we're going to be doing a lot of grading for a while.
Okay. And then working my way around the site, I'm a little confused by Lecumbre Plaza Lane. Is it a one-way street? Is it an open space? What is going on? Oh, and combined with that, I saw bollards at about 4 different sites on the plan. So what's going on Lecumbre Plaza Lane?
Thank you for asking that. That's one of the features I really wanted to get to and talk through. What we wanted to do, again, is prioritize pedestrians and bikes and not cars. But we did see and agreed with the city's Upper State Street guidelines that creating a through connection from Lecumbre to Hope was important. And what we wanted to do for this part of the project is make that connection with a dedicated bike lane, which you can see on these plans, and additional sidewalk people access. We did need to get fire truck access along where it says Lecumbre Plaza Lane, but we've talked with the fire department, and they're supportive of using bollards that will separate that out to prevent any kind of other cars to get through there, so that it really acts as a plaza, both for our new project and for Lure and whoever is coming through Macerich. So that's the kind of thinking that we've done, and there's actually in the package you have from us, we have fire department access plans and showing how that works. And then where it says Plaza Avenue, that is also a fire truck access, but with bollards, same idea is the moment you get here, you're in a walking neighborhood.
Okay. And then staying in that same area, if I'm at the Lure Fish House, that's essentially a left-hand turn or a two-way traffic around that corner there?
Correct.
All right. Just so everybody knows where we're talking about. Yeah, right there. So it appears, because of the paving pattern, that it's at all 3 things, vehicular, pedestrian, and bike at once. Some clarification. Oops, I'm tending into comments there. Sorry about that. Let's see. Oh, and there was some bike parking on the south side of that little road on opposite of the bike parking. Let's see. Oh, does the garage indeed have tandem parking in areas?
The subterranean garage does have it happens that, you have to have the garage kind of match what's happening up on the above ground, so you end up with extra space, and that's usually the opportunity to provide tandem.
Thank you. And then do the buildings, well, let's see, I don't have the building numbers down yet. Some of them overhang onto Plaza Avenue and Lecumbre Plaza Lane. Is that not correct? Let's see, if you go to your sheet 402, we have it as image 19.
Oh, I'm going to need to open up the PDF for that, but
Right.
I think,
I don't have
Chelsea,
yours.
do you want to answer that? I think it's maybe Building A has a couple of overhangs.
Yes, I think it's Building A and the building in the southwest corner. Building B1, Building A3.
Board Member Whalen, we do have the plans up here if it also helps.
I think there were some sections that confirmed that.
Okay. What page again?
Oh, which page was I looking at? A402, your image number 19. That seems to, let's see, is that the one that shows it? Yes. Down there in the lower left-hand corner. Yes. So that it does overhang, thank you. Or at least a cantilever. Let's see.
Oh, yes.
So
I'm more into now. Yeah.
So I think I answered my previous question on
Yeah.
image number 22, sheet A500. You've counted that La Cumbre Plaza Lane as open space because it's dedicated pedestrian.
That's right.
Correct? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you
that's
for that
right.
clarification.
And the reason for the overhang in that one particular section is south-facing, and it helps provide shade for those residential patio entries.
Right. But it's high enough to allow emergency access.
Oh, it actually is set back enough
Set
that the
back far
fire lane is completely outside of that.
Okay, I think that's enough questions. Thank you, Chair Anderson.
Okay, Board Member Black?
Yeah, I sort of do a clarification. Ms. Johnson, if I could just have you come up again, please. So when I look at the elevations, this is just for me, of the part of the project that you're doing, obviously what the Cornell office is doing on Hope is, is something we're used to. But I wanted to hear from you as far as how you would describe the architectural character of those buildings that that I'm seeing. Also, on that you've done, and you've sort of touched on it with materials and what have you. So I was curious as to what, when you sort of took this project on, what did you draw from Santa Barbara that you're incorporating in your architecture here? And also, just for my benefit, you don't have elevations for the west and south, and so am I to assume, and also the taller massings in the middle, the 6-story buildings. I mean, I see them in the elevations, but they're pretty nondescript for the most part. But so one is I wanted to understand what your interpretation of the architectural style that you're proposing, and also whether in fact that style carries around to those other elevations that I'm not seeing. And also for the taller massings in the middle there, I'm assuming that character will be incorporated in those buildings as well. Am I? Yeah, well, you can tell me.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the architectural style we're proposing is one that's contemporary but contextual. So one that is a warm, modern, people-centric contemporary architecture with warm, natural materials. So providing a mix of styles. One of the big goals for this project, as Brian mentioned, was creating this organic mix of styles so that you have these 6 buildings, but there is some difference and organic quality to them. And so that's the reason for the kind of refined contemporary composition, but doing it in a way that's taking inspiration from traditional architecture in certain senses. So the composition of the window styles is kind of orderly and composed, even though we're using modern lines. And we're still, there's so much architectural elevation to design. We're showing you like the first passes, but we'll have complete elevations in the upcoming PLN set. But we do, as we work our way around the buildings, we are kind of looking at developing the architecture with an eye of consistency, a refined palette, and staying as contextual as possible with Christine's architecture.
I'm sure it's sort of an extension of my question. And so I'm assuming that you couldn't help but notice the Grace Village, which is just across the parking lot to the west. There's somewhat of a contemporary flair, if you will, and the Mark as well next to it. And I was wondering whether you'd taken any inspiration from that. Because one of the criteria that we have to deal with here is neighborhood compatibility. So, and I realize it's not downtown Santa Barbara, but so I think we probably have a little more leeway. But, oh, and so I'm assuming too that the taller buildings that have the same character then, that you're suggesting for the others?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Mark and the new building that Cornell are sort of two ends of a spectrum, right? And we're trying to kind of transition between the two. So like Chelsea said, looking at some form and massing that's maybe a little bit more consistent with the Mark, but using materials that are more consistent with the sort of traditional Santa Barbara architecture, and maybe using them in slightly unconventional ways. So like the terracotta here is traditionally, the clay tile roofs. Well, what if we were to take that and use it instead as a cladding system? So it still has that sensibility, and the palette is consistent, but there's a differentiation and like I said, sort of that transition. So, and even within the kind of composition of the elevations, like the thing that's wonderful about the traditional Santa Barbara architecture is these kind of moments of symmetry and then also asymmetry, and kind of thinking about how we can do the same with the modern architecture. So there are moments where, there's like four volumes in that A2 building, and it's quite symmetrical, but then there's also a little moment of asymmetry where maybe there's a portion of the roof that's taller that's a little bit off. So hopefully kind of thinking about the way that the elevations are composed and the materiality, but then using a really different detailing, where it's the sort of cleaner, more modern detailing, I think has kind of been the way that we've been approaching the buildings.
Great, thank you. I think my other questions have been answered. Thank you.
Board Member Soffren?
Yeah. First, I just want to say that I appreciate all the effort that's gone into this up to this point. It's really, really impressive. I'm sure there's been thought put into this. Can you talk to me about just sort of what kind of security thoughts have been placed? I mean, homelessness issue is a big issue here in Santa Barbara, and how has that been factored into this design by creating these public spaces within these residences?
Thank you. That's always a concern, and it's always a good question. We haven't delved into that too deeply yet. We know it will be coming up. It is a priority to us to keep this public, keep this open, but there may be after-hours security measures that are taken, things like that. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. Has there been thought about incorporating some sort of water features into the public space, the outdoor experience?
Vicki, do you want to answer that?
We haven't thought about incorporating large-scale water feature, but we've been exploring options of integrating small-scale to help mask the noise, and then to also act like kind of appealing feature for the visitors and residents as well. So more small scale integrated with the landscape design.
Okay. And then I think my next question is kind of maybe more staff directed, which is, if I'm right, it seems like building C1 and C2 are what's really the meat of what's being presented today, and A1, A2, A3 seem like sort of feelers because they're maybe less detail about them presented, and then B1 not presented at all. Am I right about that? Okay. So is it appropriate for me to ask questions then about A1, A2, and A3, or? So I see that we've got with, let's see. I'm going to ask about B1 though, because A1 and B1 both have the public parking garages. And maybe this is a question that's more appropriate for a future meeting or presentation, but just kind of curious, because there's this view opportunity and you guys are doing these subterranean garages, has there been talk about maybe turning the parking garages, the tops of them, into outdoor parks, public spaces, sort of like, just seems like a great opportunity with a great view, and maybe not have cars on top, or maybe you planned on using that for solar purposes?
On the upper levels, especially at Building A1, and Chelsea could speak to this better than I can, that has a significant amount of additional second-level courtyards. They are not being proposed as open to the public. This gets into residential private realm. And then on top of Building B1, where the parking lot is, again, that's going to be a courtyard to the benefit of those residents as well. So that will be additional outdoor space. We just have not yet developed those to present to you yet. And I don't think we'd have enough meeting time to do it all.
Okay. No, I think that's it for questions.
Okay, and I just have a few questions just to follow up with from the other board members. They've touched briefly on it. Can you just walk through each of the larger elevations, like the State Street, the Hope, La Cumbre Plaza Lane, and the other one and how those elevations relate to the architecture that's across from it or within its proximity in context of neighborhood compatibility?
Well, I can start and then pass it off to Christine to go over her buildings. But in terms of building A1, one big cue we took for those one-story live-work volumes that I explained on the west side of State was when we walked the Upper State neighborhood, we did realize how much of the architecture is that one-story scale. And we knew with a project of this size that had to achieve the density that it needed to, that'd be very hard to get to that scale, but we did see this as an opportunity where we could bring down the scale of the architecture to that one-story height in this area and set back the four-story volume to give some relief from the State Street elevation and relate contextually to Upper State Street. And then I think the other considerations that were at play was really the material palette for A1 and A2, where, like Daniel mentioned, the terracotta tile, for instance, that we're cladding on in building A2 takes its cues from seeing so much terracotta in the Upper State Street area, throughout Santa Barbara, of course, but using it in a different way that is a little unexpected, but still refined and clean.
And while we're on this elevation,
Can I just mention, I just think, the issue of compatibility is a really tough one here, because obviously we have this charge from the housing element, which is putting a lot of units on this site. So as I call it, it is the new uptown. It is a new center for this area. And as such, it's not going to be perfectly compatible in size, bulk, and scale to what it is surrounding it. It's going to be different, and I think that's a good thing. It's a really positive thing, but we haven't looked at the buildings across the street to try to necessarily be compatible with them, other than what Chelsea just mentioned, which I think was a big move to have that lower portion of building A1 has been mentioned. But this is going to be different. There's no question about it, and I think it's going to be compatible as the center of this neighborhood, not necessarily reflective of the scale of the buildings around us.
sure, I understand that. I'm just looking for, in these larger elevations and larger site sections, it's helpful to see the height of the buildings across the street, just in proximity and like the distance they are from the curb. So that's,
And we'll give you that,
Yeah.
I think in the next submittal, we'll make sure that we do that.
okay. Let's see. I think I would go into comments. Do you guys have any follow-up questions? No?
Madam Chair, I do have a question. I was expecting, Brian, a beautiful drive-by and, you know, people get there. But I just wondered why you chose the limited locations that you took your modeling from. I think they're back behind Hamburger Habit and so forth. Is that where you consider this mostly vulnerable to, the central portions mostly visible?
We chose those two locations on La Cumbre because at that point what we were analyzing was impacts to mountain views. And those happen at public vantage points. So La Cumbre is really a public vantage point looking back at the project site and the mountains beyond. That's about the only logical location. If we moved to the other side of Sears, Sears would block it. If we went down, obviously from the freeway, it's largely blocked. We'll be doing more analysis of that, but these seem to be the two most logical locations to explain the massing of the site relative to the mountains and how it integrates with the surrounding architecture.
No, I just miss the same snapshot from moving south down state along, you know, the Mark and so forth, and then up from Hope and so forth.
We'll be continuing
Yeah.
to provide many different vantage points and
Okay,
the
understand
animations.
it's
We
early.
fully expect to do that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I go back to one comment about the compatibility and scale? And I think, I don't know if we touched on it, but we showed that 500-foot block of downtown State Street, of downtown Santa Barbara. And what's really interesting is if you look at that and the scale of those buildings right there, and that includes like the Balboa and some of the taller buildings, and then it has some smaller buildings, it's a mix. But if you look at that aerial and how quickly we go down to one-story single-family residences, and it happens right away, and it feels very natural because we're used to it. And when we did the same kind of analysis for this site, it has that same kind of die-off. You can be taller and cascade down in scale and fit within a one-story kind of single-family neighborhood, just like downtown Santa Barbara does.
Thank you. Any other follow-up questions?
Yes, Chair Anderson. I have a very unfair question for Mr. Kernell and Ms. Perrone, and you can choose not to answer it, but if all the program were to be compacted to one height, how many stories would we have? A pop quiz question. Just trying to get my head around the density.
To get to this density, if we went basically property line to property line, it would be 4 stories.
4 stories.
5? Christine says it'd be
5
5.
stories. Thank you. So you did do the homework and you passed the pop quiz.
Well,
Thank
did,
you.
Apparently. Apparently.
Just one last question to the applicant. Is there anything specific you'd like us to comment on besides what we regularly comment on? Nothing? Okay.
Yes, have at it, but, I think we would really, we feel strongly about having created these paseos and plazas in the site planning, and that was one of the critical features of the presentation today, is to get your feedback on the site planning, hopefully agreeing with it, and then the things that you would normally comment on.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, we will move into comments now. Would Board Member 6 like to begin? Remember, there's no motion
Broad.
today.
Yes,
so.
right. I must be an old horse, because I thought this room would be filled with more people that were saying this is way too big, and, that Madam Chair would have to pipe people down and say, no, we can't talk about parking, da-da-da-da, but we can't talk about massing. So I suspect there's a what do they call it? a silent portion that's not here today. And I was all prepared to go into compatibility. I'm having a hard time. I'm overwhelmed with the size of this project. I think that technically the project follows the rules of the new housing development rules, and the massing is a reflection of that. But this site is, with the exception of 5 points, this site dwarfs most of the sites on State Street in area and is 2 to 3 times the typical frontage. This uniqueness generates an overwhelming mass that, compared to the rest of the neighborhood, that I'm just really uncomfortable with. You know, I am old horse, but I am prepared to stretch the old ABR rules of what's compatible and not compatible with the new housing rules, and stretch my judgments to, you know, allow bigger and higher and so forth. But, you know, because this site is so large, I'm really having a hard time stretching to find one of our ABR goals is to find appropriate massing, and I'm just having a real hard time getting my arms around that. And I know that you know, I'm all on board and resonate with the need for housing and so forth, but you know, I was prepared to see this happen in typical sites up and down state and spread out, but to see it all, you know, in this one big area just is very uncomfortable for me. So I just wish that the project had a lot more balance between the idea of compatible massing and maximizing the units. I think the architect has done a very admirable job so far in trying to cut things up and, you know, very wisely try to manage that bulk. But I think there's more to go to where I can accept it as a reasonable massing. And also, ABR is also responsible to see that we include high standards of livability, quote unquote. And if we, you know, I love the images that the architect has shown of the public spaces and so forth, but I quickly counted a lot of the stories that were involved in some of those buildings, and they were 3, 2, even 1, and the plazas were a lot wider. Can we go to section sheet 310? I think it's one of the lower east-west, north-south. Yeah, let's see here. Let's go down one more. See, you know, when you look at these sections and you see the voids for the paseos along these 6- and 5-story buildings, I'm worried about the livability of these things. There's, deep shade, there's privacy between buildings. I don't sense that livability that we're responsible to encourage. So I'm worried about that, and that's why I have a few recommendations. That's why I'll have some other comments, but I think that would be my goal, is to, I see, you're establishing these, they're beautiful with some exceptions of layout and so forth that I've already started in my questions, but are these really livable? I see your renderings, and there's a lot of ins and outs, and maybe it's too early to see that, but, for instance, the upper section there, the middle paseo that doesn't seem livable to me. I hope, what I'm trying to say is, we're trying to attract people to move from out of the city to a very desirable living area. Is this going to be better than their convenient, open residences in Lompoc and other places? Are they going to be attracted to this new style of living? And our responsibility is to see that these are livable and open and comfortable, and I'm very concerned about the livability. The guidelines speak to convenience from your car to your place of residence. The experience of walking through this huge garage, and it's just a different lifestyle that I'm concerned that is going to be attractive to attract those new residential people. As I mentioned in my questions, it's now kind of a minor. I'm a little disappointed especially in the strip retail along Plaza Avenue, that here we're trying to generate more vitality to the retail, and I think and I don't know the solution, but I think the project has turned its face away from that, however minor, part of retail that is remaining. So how do you start opening up these paseos and backing the buildings away? And as I mentioned in my questions, I think one of the ways is to find different arrangements of units that provide denser internal buildings, so you can get more units for the size of that building and bring it down and add it, of course, to the paseos and the open areas. And can we bring up, and I don't know where it was, can we bring up a hand rendering that you commented on being in terracotta, dark terracotta, to make my point? It was a hand rendering. Not that one particularly, but is there another one? It was one showing the texture of the dark terracotta. Yes. So this is my, again, I think the project team has done a very admirable job of massaging the masses and very sensitive to that. But I still see and it's apparent in this, I don't want to say homogeneous, but a mass along the block that has not been cut up enough yet. And you especially see it here, you see it in your residential floor plans, level 4, 3, 4, 3 and 4 especially, and maybe even 5, where this block is fairly consistent around all frontages. And what I would hope to get more of, and I say this, I want to say get further cut up of this block that I perceive, this mass block that I see. And I think, again, there's different building types to bring the density internal further. And this might be radical, but I think we don't need to be so careful to hide the 5 and 6 story buildings. And you alluded to, again, and I have it written all over here, maybe even, we don't have to be embarrassed about those 5 and 6 stories, as we're not embarrassed about them in downtown at the Balboa building. There's a very good example of a 5-story. I'm not sure if it's part of it, but there's a tall building just north of the entry to El Presidio. That is a lovely building, as Christine pointed out. We have these exceptions along State Street that don't disturb the overall massing and feeling of that. There are exceptions to the rule. And I think that if one brought some of these 5 and 4 story buildings out to be exposed and closer to the street, granted they would need to be narrow and defined and very different, but I think that would begin to help if we got some of these around the outsides. We could start opening up some of those tightly, well, in my opinion, tight and deep livable spaces that would be so important to the viability and livability of this project. Now, I want to say is that, and you mentioned that compatibility is a transitional thing. This is going to be new. It's going to be the leader. It's going to be the first one. But we're going to have more buildings that are going to be proposed, 5 and 6 stories, along this section of Upper State that will have narrow, limited frontages that won't be able to hide those 5 and 6 story things. So we're going to get that massing along State. So I think that allowing it here is going to be okay and going to be kind of a future compatibility of something that we don't have there yet. I've probably over dwelled on that, but anyway. So, as I say, the block needs to have more variation. So I'm hoping that, with the loosening up of hiding all the 5 and 6 in the center and developing some around the perimeters, we can open up the livability. I think, so I've talked about massing. I think that, and I know it's early, and I see it in your rendering, loose renderings of the paseos, that there's a lot more variation and richness in the architecture. What I see now is paseo openings and block and building masses that are, and especially fenestration, that are very rhythmic and consistent along the whole elevations made available. And I'm hoping that, with the ability to cut into this block, that we get a lot more ups and downs. We can get a lot more significant setbacks. Some of those setbacks could be on the ground floor to introduce a paseo that's a lot more wider, a dominant plaza from the street. I love there's a great that you have this internal courtyard that seems to be sizable, but I would wish that we'd have a hierarchy or a dominant plaza paseo out to State that says, oh yeah, this is the main entry to this guy. So a lot more variety in sizes, massing, architecture. I'm thinking that, and I think I've seen this architect do this very well, is if side-by-side units, the fenestration can be combined to read as one unit, then you get another rhythm of fenestration that it's not so, this is unit one, da-da-da-da. It's not so regimented or regular as I perceive it to be here. Again, I think that an interruption of the main consistent architecture with some really unique architecture to such as the brick and the Granada, not the size of the Granada, but is that an old history building there that was there before? I know it's faux, but to have these interruptions along this block would help. I think maybe even if somewhere there were angles that were slight angles to some of the mass that came out on State Street or the main Hope or the main perimeters, if there was tweaks that could happen in that regard too. I'm very glad to find that you're going to shorten, well, all my discussions on rhythm and homogeny is very relevant to when we look at building C2. I mean, can we bring that up? I think maybe, maybe we don't have to be so, well, first of all, I'm glad that that building will be shortened because of the park. I'm delighted. But even the remaining elevation is very long and the same rhythm. And granted, there's step backs and so forth, but there's not enough. And perhaps we don't have to be so sensitive about compatibility to the opposite side of the street where Spanish it's kind of a weak Spanish in some places, but maybe that building has a gap in it, significant gap, and it changes from the Mediterranean to contemporary again. So I'm okay with so enough said about that. I think that I don't have any problem with what I see here as far as the styles, pulled out from the idea of my concerns about massing and continuity and rhythm and da-da-da. I see that we're trying to get to a place where I think the contemporary is compatible, where we have warmness, we have a mass-based architecture. We don't have outside, yes. So, I think just the last comments here, very specific comments. I've already said that. I think that there's a roofed deck on level 5, building C, that really brings mass to that building. I think, there's an opportunity there to take that down, and if it's desired, it should be found a place for it found deeper in the project. And I was very interested in the way you dug building C1 into the rising corner of Hope and at Hope. And if I understand it correctly, that building C1 next to the Paseo, that's actually a 5-story building, but yet it reads as 4 stories because the corner is dug down and down into the, you step down to the first floor. Is that correct?
It's pretty level.
It's now level?
Well, I mean, it's level in this iteration.
Pardon my interruption. May I ask Chair Anderson if we could just have the applicant come up and speak into the microphone for our recording and for everyone in the audience?
The way I understand it was that the glass massing on what appears to be the ground floor is actually 2 stories, and half of it is below grade.
Not, if you started the corner of State and Hope where there's that sandstone wall and a courtyard, that is largely at grade at the corner. It might be a foot lower. We're still getting final survey work done, but it will be very close to the same level as the corner. But you can see going down Hope, there's that significant grade drop that happens. I think that's almost 8 feet from the corner.
Yes.
Yeah, so it is happening there, and that is that kind of different type of articulation of fenestration that you're referring to, that we're starting to dig into. That is a 2-story volume, and those actually, the first one may dig in about a foot, not much more, if you retain, but then you can see at the other end, there's a few steps up because I held the floor line constant to
So am I misreading things like Building C on the upper elevation, on the State Street elevation? That right-hand
At that paseo?
roof, that right-hand roof, that is, hipped roof is a 5-story? It read on the plan it was a 5-story.
So what's happening there is our finished floor is at 194 and State Street is at about 197 there. So you have a 3-foot drop into that paseo. So that's adding to that ground level height. I think it's 4 stories, but the ground level, one, because it was already a higher plate, plus the additional 3 feet is, I think, what you're starting to read as a taller piece, closer to a 4.5 story. Is that what you're getting at?
So it's
Yeah.
a 4.5 story in
Correct.
relationship to the street.
Correct.
So is there other opportunities to do that along State?
Other opportunities to do that?
To dig down and, I noticed that the main plaza had about 4 steps down. So is there more opportunity to increase that depth and dig the front end of this
It gets a
block
little.
into?
Well, I'm sorry. It's a complicated site
I
plan for
understand.
meeting all of the adjacent grades along Plaza Avenue and La Cumbra. This is the kind of finished floor level we settled on, which is typical around 194. So you do have a step down at the next plaza, and that was in Chelsea's sketch as well, where there was a couple steps down.
Yeah.
We like that not only because of, like, it was sinking the building in a bit, but we really liked it because State Street is a difficult place to be. It's
Yeah.
not pleasant. But by dropping those paseos down, we think it buffers and makes it a better experience. But it can help, to your point, the
Yeah.
mass.
Well, as usual, I've belabored it, but if there is an opportunity to sink and, have half stories with submerged steps from State Street, in just some areas that would, as you've seen on Building C1, it would be an opportunity.
Yes, we agree.
Okay, thanks. I think I've belabored things to the
Okay,
point
we can
where-
come back to you.
Okay.
If you think of something.
Nope, that's it.
All right, Board Member Whalen, do you have comments?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I am in general agreement with everything Mr. Six said, although not nearly so eloquent. Just to go over a few of the fine points from the State Street guidelines, the project should enhance the Santa Barbara built environment, possess their own identity within the context of a Santa Barbara character. I think Mr. Six has touched on those very well. They should be pedestrian friendly along the streetscape. I'm not sure the project actually quite makes it there yet. It still doesn't seem like an enhanced pedestrian experience along State Street. Ultimately, I think the site and the project are overbuilt. Despite complying with all of the zoning and state laws, it just feels overbuilt. And the project should present an integrated appearance, and that doesn't mean, to my interpretation, hybridizing the neighboring buildings. That it should be complete and integrated in and of itself. Also wouldn't point to those buildings to the west as being particularly admirable to the Santa Barbara spirit or the city charter, which calls for a certain expression that relates to our history and tradition. So they should integrate harmoniously with the immediate neighborhood that is open to interpretation and a dialogue with the clients. I do think the project overwhelms the adjacent buildings to the west and to the south. We didn't talk about this much, but I'm concerned about Plaza Avenue, where those eateries are very popular, and there's already a lot of pedestrians scampering across from parking, and there's a very weird intersection that I would hope the project could resolve that is between Bristol Farms and those eateries. It kind of jogs around. You can't, anyways, I would hope that the project could take a closer look at resolving some of those problems along Plaza Avenue. Is there really a need for Plaza Avenue to take 2 jogs along there? Perhaps they're more compatible uses for project buildings along that site that mirror the other commercial projects across the street and off the site. Again, I think it overwhelms the existing building to the south. You've proposed, 5, 6 stories adjacent to 1-story, well, 1.5-story commercial building. That doesn't seem like very compatible, even though it is proposed to be rebuilt by 2077. We can hope for the best. More specifically, some comments to the open space and the landscape. I was so pleased to see your example of Granada. I caution you from interpreting it in 2 dimensions rather than 3, and Member 6 touched on this. There, in building A3, he specifically pointed out what you would call a paseo that's 35 feet wide and 75 feet tall. That is really not in the spirit of Granada. Well, I would like to think. And these open spaces or community spaces, especially the main plaza. Now in Granada, you can correct me, but they wouldn't plunk a big tree and seating areas right in the middle of a public space. Those European plazas are meant more for assembly. And in this case, building A3 may completely overshadow that plaza, putting it in permanent shadow. And I would ask the proponents to seriously consider daylighting of these public spaces for their enjoyment and livability, because indeed the living spaces are going to be limited. So it's the public spaces that I would really like to see developed in a more personal and a more habitable, and perhaps it could have a completely different identity than the rectilinearity that is going on. What are my other notes? The entrance, the pedestrian entrance from State Street, I think could use a stronger expression either in the buildings or a formal gateway or something that really announces what we're seeing on the screen here now. The Hope elevation, I think, gets it exactly right for expressing who we are and where we are in Santa Barbara. Whereas the States, I would like to see personally that expression on State Street. Now, it could take a more modern turn as it rounds the corner down Plaza and reflects those buildings to the west, but I'm all for expressing our Santa Barbara style and what we cherish most of all here. I think it's interesting to note that the proposal is twice the allowed floor area of the Upper State Street design guidelines. That's neither here nor there, but I do think it's worth mentioning. What else do I have? Well, if I have something else, we'll come back. Thank you, Chair Anderson.
Thank you. Board Member Black?
Well, you know, at first glance, I really like what I see in terms of just architectural style. I like the variation in style from Hope to State, but like some others, I'm a little bit overwhelmed by the size, bulk, and scale of it all. It's particularly telling when you're out on the site, as I was yesterday, and I look up at the Macy's Tower and imagine that all the buildings in the center are going to be as tall as that. And I just went, wow, that's going to be a lot. But I mean, there are those that would say, well, you can pretty much get used to anything, but, and I'm sure we will if it ends up being that way. So, and if it's well done and it serves a purpose in terms of providing housing, I think that's as important. I do like, you know, the question was asked about the value of the paseos in it, and they're very valuable, obviously. So, I mean, without them, I don't think you could have a project. But so I like the integration of the public space, the paseos. I'm a little concerned, just as it goes back to the height of the buildings. I mean, if I look at that primary plaza, it's completely surrounded by 6-story buildings, and so I have to imagine that space is going to be in shade pretty much all the time, I guess. But be that as it may, that's just what is, I guess. But I think that probably could be balanced with just, you know, a judicious use of, you know, rich materials that we're used to seeing in this town. And so, and I guess when it gets down to it, even in spite of the reservations that one might have or I might have about size, bulk, and scale, I think if the project is well done and there is that richness that of materials that you know, that we know can happen, you know, it probably will be a lot more palatable for many. And so, you know, I don't have strong feelings about the size, bulk, and scale. I mean, it's overwhelming. You know, it does give me pause, but at the same time, I think it could be balanced by just the fact that we are providing a necessary commodity in this town, housing. So that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you. Board Member Soffren.
I'm a big fan of this saying, problems are opportunities. And this is a great opportunity, and there's a lot of great work going into this. I do feel that it's a little homogeneous. Like, the jump between buildings C1 and C2, and then the architectural difference between A1, A2, A3 is just very far. But at the same time, I love seeing a mix of architecture. I used to live in the West Village in New York City, and I think one of the things, and I know that we're in Santa Barbara, but one of the things I love about the West Village in New York City is you've got these tall buildings and sort of these tight little streets that are kind of like paseos, and I see if that was bad, the West Village wouldn't be so popular for so many people to want to live there. That neighborhood continues to get reinvigorated, and I see this as an opportunity to create a village on Upper State Street that doesn't exist, where people are going to want to be there. And I think that in regards to neighborhood compatibility, when I look around State Street up here, and I think about what's around, I mean, there's a lot of different architectural styles there. And I also think that this project has a wonderful opportunity to redefine Upper State Street and set an example that will ultimately impact the opposite side of the street. I think north of this project, the property owners are going to see this, and there's going to be a tremendous shift here. So I'm excited about what this project does. I think the mass, bulk, and scale it's okay for what it is. This is going to be a new neighborhood and a new community, and I just, you know, going back to that, I see the future where 10, 20 years from now, the opposite side of the street is going to be more similar to this. So I do like how you've got the 6-story setback from the street, though. I think that's nice to swallow. But I would love to, going back to sort of the village idea, and I don't know if I'll get my head chopped off for bringing this up, but like the Pacific Palisades, there's the Palisade Village that was recently built in the last few years, and there's residences there. And I love going to that village because I think you have a lot of what the goal is here. You create this community within the, you know, you have this neighborhood, you have retail, residential, you've got restaurants. It's just this incredible experience. But I think there's more articulation in the building finishes and spaces, a mix of architectural styles to make it interesting and feel a little more timeless. And one thing I love about Santa Barbara is how timeless Santa Barbara is. And I have concerns but I don't want to, I think that's negative. I think that this is a great place that this project is at, and I think that you guys are going to be able to introduce some more articulation, maybe some more finishes, more blend of architectural styles to kind of maybe make this feel like it wasn't just built, but maybe slowly built over time and has a character that always belonged where it is. So that's what I have to say.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and my own comments would be very similar to Mr. Sofrin's. I don't find a problem with the heights. I think that that's necessary for this. I do agree that you can study manipulating where the 5 and 6 stories are to maybe do add the interest that we're looking for in the variation of these elevations. I think the idea of adding the park is great. I would study maybe it's not just on the end or how maybe that's integrated into your Hope Avenue elevation to break up that building and how long it looks. I think it's very thoughtful to have specimen trees as like the gateway to the paseos. I think that's a nice idea instead of just using the architecture. I think you can also use the architecture as the gateway to the paseos and articulate those corners. I think that would be helpful. I think another way to study the variation of your buildings would be to look at varying the floor heights in each building, just to help with the fenestration and not getting these monotonous lines along, specifically on this elevation of State Street that we're looking at. Introducing the green pockets is great. I would continue studying program adjacencies, specifically with the introduction of the park and maybe the dog wash station and the gym and how maybe those all interact together and get the locals, like your neighborhood, involved with the people who live there, and so it's more of a neighborhood feel, I guess. And something maybe just on the plans to differentiate your live-work units, because it does feel like the development is kind of turning its back on its neighbors, but in reality, I think you have been very thoughtful with what you're doing and where the units are going. So I think it just needs to be relayed to us maybe in a different way. And I think those are my comments, but I think it's a great project. I think it's going in the right direction. The different architectural styles are, I think they're great. I think that's what we need, and those are my comments. So any follow-up? Yes.
Yeah, I have to follow up. I'm a contrarian, and differing from Mr. Wayland, I think that the portions of the building that are attempting to be very traditional Mediterranean, for instance, the elevation of C, it's just stretching that vernacular too far, and it needs to be a stripped down or a contemporary, more contemporary. There's just limits to how far that you can take that romanticness and stretch it. And the other thing I resonate with is Chair Anderson's idea that the park may be moved up Hope to be more central. And number one, it would give a significant break in the elevations. And, you know, before I learned that you were dropping the south wing of C2, I thought that that would be a good place to put a narrowed down version of a Balboa building, as it's not up against and competing with other things on it. It's standing alone, so, you know, the views and so forth out of the windows and so forth would be more comfortable there. And it wouldn't be imposing itself in shadow, with shadows or adjacencies to other buildings in the project.
Any other follow-up comments from the board?
This one. I just wanted to say I agree with Ms. Anderson about when I look at this elevation on the top, how you've just got all the window lines, all the floor plates, everything's at the same height, but then also vertically, all the vertical, there's so much continuity in the vertical lines, and maybe there could be a little more breaking of that up, just to make it a little more interesting, because you're always seeing a building from an angle, and I just think that added articulation, if possible, would be great.
Okay, well, those are our comments. Thank you all for coming today. That's the only item we have on the agenda, so we look forward to seeing you guys back, and we will adjourn our ABR meeting for March 4th, 2024.